Welcome to another Airbrush Asylum video. This is the Joker part 4. So if you haven't already, go check out parts 1 to 3 so that you know how I got up to this part in the artwork. There will be 5 parts in total, so let's get right into it and continue on with the artwork. So I'm using my detail black with the Iwata CMSB Micron. This airbrush runs a 0.18mm needle and nozzle setup, so allows for nice fine detail. And I'm just working in some of the texturing. Now the detail black is made up of transparent base, a bit of black and some reducer, and these are all Createx illustration colors. And I'm working on Blair Synthetic paper, which is available from schoolofrealism.com. I'll pop some links in the description to products used within this video so that you can easily find them. And by all means, if you have any other further questions, just leave a comment in the comment section below. So as you can see, I'm switching back to my dowel. So this allows me to erase some of these real bright white highlights and be nice and accurate with it. Due to the obviously sharpened end. And what I'm using now is the Faber-Castell eraser pencil. This has a white and a pink end, so for anyone that hasn't watched any of the other parts, the white end is the aggressive part of it and the pink end is the softer eraser. So just utilize whichever end you find works best for the particular artwork that you're working on. And it's a lot of layering, as you probably already aware if you have been following this series. So it's a lot of spraying the paint down, manipulating it by removing it, and then putting more paint on. So a mixture of both freehand airbrushing as well as the eraser techniques. The beauty of using the Blair Synthetic paper is that with the Createx illustration colors, it allows for you to do all that manipulation and erasing. So you can do many different effects and it's not going to damage the paper, and it allows for that ease of erasing and scratching, and even if you're using a blade to get real fine highlights, you can do all that on this paper. So it's extremely versatile and a very good product to use. So if this is the first time checking out one of my videos, then welcome. For everyone else, welcome back. If you like this content, by all means give it the thumbs up, share it out, and feel free to hit subscribe. Tap on that bell icon, that'll notify you every time I put out new content. Okay, so I am now switching over to Flesh, and I'm using my Iwata HPCS Eclipse for this. This runs a 0.35mm needle. And I'm just spraying through my paper templates that I made earlier in this video. I started off with a bit of Flesh and now I'm going over the top with the dark blue. So if you want to know how these are made up, go check out the other parts. I explain everything in those. As far as the mixing ratios. And coming in on the jacket, I go in with the dark red. And as you can see, I'm not saturating the surface, I'm building it up gradually. And you'll also notice that using my magnets and the paper template, I masked off the blue section that I just did to protect it from the red overspray. And I'm just adding a few more coats of that dark red. This is the same blue and red that I use for the Joker's makeup. You'll notice that the paint was extremely wet in one spot and it has removed a little tiny section, so probably just the paper template has scratched that off as it was still a bit wet. So I'll go ahead and fix that up a bit later. But right now I'm just popping out some more detail and picking up some of those sharp edges with my detail black. And I'm using my freehand templates there. These are the Fire Tool templates that I designed earlier on in the year. These are available through our website, and that's Australia wide only. If you are located overseas, then hit up Airshot Stencils and they have them available as well. They've got they come in a set, and there's lots of different curves, which is nice and handy for doing all these sort of nice sharp edges on the neck area and around the jaw. So great templates to use, not just for fire. And you'll notice what I did there to fix up that little bit of red was spray the red over it, and then I've merged my overspray from that shadow, which has then covered that particular white spot within the jacket area. Now you may have noticed I've switched to sepia brown, and I'm just shading over the top of that original flesh color that I sprayed in on the neck area. Now this is where the makeup, so the white face makeup, is slowly coming off and exposing some of the obviously the skin of the Joker. So I'm just using that sepia just to shade it, and back with my detail black. The airbrush that I used for the sepia was an HBA, so this is I think they're discontinued now from Iwata. They got discontinued, I believe, I think it was earlier this year, so I grabbed a couple before they were out of stock of them permanently. So as you can see, back with my detail black and the CMSB, I'm just sort of applying an uneven shading to that makeup area on the neck there. Lifting my reference up and down just to see where some of those shadows are and replicating them as close as possible. And then back with my eraser pencil and beginning to remove some of that paint just to create some of those highlights. And as I mentioned in the other videos, just take your time with the texturing. It is a layer upon layer process, so it does take some time to get a nice build up of the texturing. So take your time, follow your reference, and just work towards what you're happy with. And just remember that mixing it up with a bit of freehand airbrushing always looks really good. So don't just purely rely on using the eraser pencils to create your texture. Utilize the airbrush as well. Do some freehand sort of stippling, and then utilize your eraser pencil and the dowel to create that balance from that real harsh highlight to softer highlight. Back with my sepia brown and the HBA, and just working some shading back over the top, as well as some uneven texturing within the neck area. Now switching back to my detail black and just freehanding in some of those edges of the black background where it meets the jacket, the Joker's jacket. And again grabbing my freehand shield just to lay in a nice shadow. So So again, if you are using a freehand shield and you don't want that extreme harshness that it would create when you lay it flat, just lift your template up off the surface a little bit and that'll give you a softer spray. You can also move the template to get some other effects as well. This works particularly well if you're doing texturing with a template. You could literally hold it in one spot, spray through it and move it. Now continuing on with my detailed black, I'm picking out some of the hair and just bringing in the whole design as such, like the background, merging it all in around the neck area, pulling out some of those darker shadows while I've got the detailed black in there, just to start to build my contrast so I can see where everything's going. Remember to always work within the darker spots first and get the feel for the color, especially when you've switched over, and then you can gauge from those darker spots how dark you need to go with some of the other shading around that particular area. Again, utilizing a bit of the freehand airbrushing just to soften some of those edges that I've got real sharp from using the paper template and the freehand shield. This does take a bit of practice, so if you're not competent with the airbrush, make sure that you've got like a test panel or a piece of paper, scrap paper near you, so that you can practice your strokes before you attempt them on your artwork. And with the hair, I'm really focusing on the shapes and shadows to build that hair, and I'm looking at the direction of the hair as well. So I'm, just focus on the reference and replicate that as best as possible. I'm using some dagger strokes in there as well, and just building my shadows and then merging it all into the background. So whenever you're trying to replicate hair like this, which is a bit thicker, you need to you don't add in as many strands. Okay, so if you do too many strands, it's going to make it look way too thin. So depending on what style of hair it is, you kind of allow your eye to finish off a lot of the detailing by putting in the deeper shadows and not joining them everywhere, and that will give the appearance of a thicker clump of hair. If for argument's sake I was painting someone with extremely thin hair, or even if I was doing a zombie for instance that have that real scraggly hair, then you would have it a lot linier. So just keep that in mind whenever you're doing a portrait of sorts, that you look at the hair as its own separate entity and artwork, and just break it down and make out all the shapes and shadows and then just replicate those. In other words, just paint what you see. Just adding some of the finer strands in around the ear area there. Just utilizing the blade and trying to pick out some of those highlights just on the finer hairs on the ear. Hasn't really worked as well as I'd like, so I'm not going to go much further with that. I'll come back in later and I'm actually going to utilize some white. The reason being is the hair on this particular painting is a little bit more out of focus, so I didn't want it to be too sharp, and I think the white's going to work a lot better just to create some of those highlights. Now, instead of using straight white, as I mentioned just before, I decided to go with flesh. Just thought it would blend a little bit better and not be as harsh on the hair. I'm going to tint it back with some green anyway, so it didn't need to be extremely bright white, and there was enough white within the flesh mix to opaque, so I could just use that and then tint back over it, and it would just give it a little bit more of a sort of a natural blend within the portrait rather than being too stark. So you notice I've gone back over the scratched area of that real fine hair with this colour, and that's opaqued over that. So in a sense we've eliminated the harsh scratching that the blade caused, and just picking out some of the white highlights with that flesh tone. Again, not going over everything, only picking out those brighter highlights. And now using moss green, I'm just going to dust over those white highlighted areas. And I'm sort of blending them back into the hair, leaving the highest spot, so the actual brightest spot of the hair, especially the hair curls, and I'm leaving more of that flesh showing within those areas, and then neutralizing everything else with that moss green. And now coming back in with the dark blue, I'm just going to spray over some of that eyebrow section where those highlights are, and just merging that makeup above the top of that brow back into the eyebrow section. And then I'm going to re-highlight some of those hairs. I want it to appear as though that's really caked on makeup within that eyebrow, and these hairs are sort of clumped up with that makeup, and then some of those highlights are protruding out of them. Well, I got the dark blue, I just sprayed over the eye a little bit as well. And I'm also using it on the edge of the makeup underneath the eye, where the makeup meets the white part of the Joker's face makeup. So again, having that balance between a bit of freehand airbrushing as well as all the texturing techniques completed with the eraser pencil and the dowel gives you a much more realistic look. And the airbrush that I'm using for this particular colour is the Iwata CMC Plus Micron. This runs a 0.23mm needle nozzle setup. Now, utilising my dowel, I'm scratching out some of those highlights again within that eyebrow section just to pull out some of those hairs and just make the colour look like it's all blending it back into what I created earlier with that makeup. So just continuing on with the dowel, adding more of those highlights underneath the eye. So again, you can do as much of this as you like if you are following along with this tutorial. So we're pretty much wrapping it up now with part 4. So I do hope that you enjoyed this video. Until next time, go grab your airbrush, do some amazing artwork yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon in the next tutorial. Bye for now.